Let's go, folks. Time for the Gibby Show.
How you doing, baseball fans, and welcome to another edition of the Gibby Show, brought to you by Miller Lite, the official beer of Major League Baseball and the Gibby Show. I'm John Arezzi. Joining me, the two-time manager of the Toronto Blue Jays. He led the 2015 squad to the ALCS. Member of the 1986 World Champion New York Mets, still a number one best-selling author on Amazon.com. The man who always tells it like it is, direct from San Antonio, Texas, the baseball life for himself, John Gibbons. John, how you doing?
Johnny, doing good, man. Just, the usual, sweating down here. I got to tell you that, and then, watching some good baseball, some crazy baseball. How things just change and, week to week around in that major league, at that major league level.
Yes, it does. It's a roller coaster for sure for many teams. But you are enduring a prolonged heat wave down there. And you said that you really never experienced this before because you're always on the road previously in previous summers.
Yeah, because, professional baseball for over 40 years. Yeah, I'd always leave during the summer, but now I've been in some really hot places too. Yeah. But my time in Toronto, the most beautiful summers you'll ever get anywhere. It's incredible. They might have like a week, 10 days of a real hot spell, but it's not like this. And then the summers up there are gorgeous.
Yeah. Well, we'll talk about the Blue Jays today on today's show. A nice bounce back week for them. And also on today's Gabbing with Gibby, brought to you by Tim Hortons. It'll be a special one. Joining us will be the former general manager of the New York Mets from 1997 to 2003. He was not just in the minor league system together, but you also worked for this gentleman
My
in
boss.
The minor leagues. He was your boss for a while. We're referring to one of the most renowned baseball analysts, Mr. Steve Phillips, will join us today. Then we'll have another roast and toast inspired by our friends over at Miller Lite as well. But Gibby, let's get right into the leadoff. The Jays bounce back, winning 4 of their last 6 games. They hold the 3rd spot right now, if the season ends today, in the American League for the wild card. Just half a game ahead of the Houston Astros, 1 game ahead of the Los Angeles Angels. They won 2 series in a row, 2 against Miami, 2 against Oakland, scoring 23 runs against Oakland in 3 days. Springer hit his 55th career leadoff home run, now in 2nd place there. A lot of good things. Vladdy hit a couple of home runs, his first couple at Rogers Center in 2023. Kikuchi looks more confident whatever he start. Brilliant 7 innings this past week. What stood out for you this week, Gibby? Because I know you always look at it the glass half full, and this was a positive week for the Jays.
Well, Johnny, you got to look at it half full, because the main reason they got a good team, right? It's been an up and down ride. There's no doubt about it, and I think everybody expected, well, they're just going to run away with it, but it's never that easy. But what was key, they lost 2 out of 3 down there in Texas, and they went down to Miami, and Miami was, arguably the hottest team at the time, along with the Giants who were coming up. But they won 2 out of 3, and they faced some good pitching, right? Okay, and then they come home and you got Oakland. Everybody thinks, well, okay, that's going to be easy. It's never that easy. It's never you throw the balls and gloves out there and you win. No, it's not. And they wasn't. They got beat that debut, but then they bounced back and won the next 2. And so but now's a big week for them, I think, because you got the Giants coming in, who are now the hottest team in baseball, arguably.
Yeah, the Giants, John, have won 12 of their last 14. They had a stretch where they won 10 in a row, so they're on fire.
Yeah, and then you got the old nemesis, the Red Sox, who the Blue Jays owned last year. But these National League teams come in there. That's a good test for those. The American Leaguers, they usually play pretty good against the National Leaguers. So we'll see. But it's time to build on something. But they're sitting in a playoff spot right now. So everybody can come in off the ledge and at least for a few more days. And that's going to be one of those crazy seasons. What? Yeah, everybody expects to run away with it, or would love to see him run away with it. Yeah, that's natural, but it's great for the sport. You got this competition going on. It's going to keep everybody intrigued and focused on it. But in the end, like I always say, if you're good enough, you'll get in. If you're not, you won't. Hang with them.
Hey, I'd much rather be watching the Blue Jays and their exciting team, and which I do watch all of their games, rather than my nemesis. I'll call them the New York Mets, who are just collapsing in a way that is freaking me out. So I'm happy
Yeah,
to watch
it's
the
hard.
Blue
It's
Jays.
hard. It's one of those years, and you're not gonna. The thing is about playing in New York too that you ain't gonna. Yeah, there's nowhere to hide, man.
There
Nowhere to
isn't.
hide. But it's almost like the curse of Diaz when he went down that WBC.
That was it.
It's like it's affected everything. And the guys are having some off years, but that's what happens in baseball sometimes.
It is. It is. But I do want to talk about Chris Bassitt. He had his second rough outing this past Friday. He gave up 4 runs in 5 innings, 3 of those coming in the first inning. And Bassitt kind of surprised everyone in the middle of that game and decided to stop calling his own pitches and handed the game over to Danny Jansen. He said now that he's thinking of ending that experiment and will let the catchers call the game from now on. I want to get your take on this. As a catcher, as a skipper, isn't that, as far as a pitcher calling his own game, isn't that just kind of, it's just not the way the game is supposed to be played?
Yeah, well, I mean, they do. They in reality they do call their own game. If the catcher's calling it the way it used to be, and they put down the sign they don't want it, they can throw it or shake it off and go to something else. But if you got a real good catcher, like you get Danny Jansen back there, let's say, and he's adamant about something, he'll call timeout and go tell the pitcher, listen, we need to do this. So I think what happened and I think this all stems from obviously the pitch clock, right? Because Bass never had this problem in the past. But so he started. It's just kind of. We had Russell Martin on a month ago, and Russell was talking about the pitch clock and one of the best defensive catchers ever in the game. Works great with pitchers. Saying sometimes he was talking about the pitcher doesn't always realize what he's doing out there, what he actually has, and so a good catcher can kind of help get him through different things or take charge, right? And I think that's really what Bass needs right now. Because but I think he started doing it on his own because he was under the
He's
gun
got
with the
8
clock.
pitches too. He's got 8 different pitches, and so
Yeah,
how do you determine what you're going to call? You leave it up to the catcher. You have 8 pitches, and that's the one thing about Bassitt last year. He was just he was great, but he shook off the catcher all the time, and there was no pitch clock last year, so that had a lot
right.
to do with it, obviously.
So it'll be interesting this next start how that goes. But yeah, we talk. Everybody raves and loves the pitch clock and all that. I get that. We all do a little bit for some reason, but it affects some guys. And clearly, one of the top pitchers in the game, it's affecting him. And you hate to see that because this is his profession, and he
Yeah.
got to a certain spot by doing something a certain way. You know what? Maybe there should be exceptions for everything.
Yeah, well, he's still dominating. If you look at him against right-handed batters, they're only hitting 183 against him with 3 home runs, OPS of 510. But when you turn it around to lefties on the splits, they're hitting 283 with 13 home runs and 972 OPS. So he's certainly having the problems with the left-handed hitters. So let's see where Bassitt goes. He's a professional, as we both know. He's diligent. He's going to get his focus back, and he's had some amazing outings for the Jays so far this year as well. So we're looking for a great second half from Bassitt.
Yeah, I agree. And but you just hate. There's so much riding on it. You hate the guy. He doesn't work well when he's rushed. He's just one of those guys, and there's a
No,
bunch of them
he
out there,
doesn't.
right?
That's
So,
true.
but that's that's the way the game is now. We're competing for that metal trophy, piece of
That's
metal.
right.
So.
That piece of metal, very expensive piece of metal. Well, you are listening to the Gibby Show, presented by Miller Lite. John, even though you are in Texas, this is a very special week for Canadians. It's Canada Day on July 1st, and then here in the States, we have the July 4th holiday. So certainly time to celebrate both of these great holidays with some Miller Lite.
Yeah, oh Johnny, it, man. It tastes like Miller time. But yeah, I can remember that was always one of my favorite days. Because we put on this bright red, look like a big tomatoes Canada jersey. You know, we loved it. You know, the fans loved it. They came, you know, the place is all red and so yeah, it's a good time to drink a couple Miller Lights. You know, so I celebrate Canada Day just about every day down here.
There you go.
Corner booths, sticky floors, weekdays that feel like weekends. You never forget the way some things taste. Miller Lite, great taste, 90 calories. Tastes like Miller time.
All righty, John. And finally, for the leadoff, the All-Star voting has progressed. We're in phase 2 now. 5 Blue Jays have advanced. The fans can vote this week, and the starters are going to be announced later this week. Competing for your votes right now are Blue Jay players Vladdy at first base, Whit Merrifield, Matt Chapman, Bo Bichette, and Kevin Kiermaier. Let me ask you on these 5 guys, who do you think is going to make the starting lineup for the AL this year?
Well, Bo's got to be on there, right?
Yeah.
You know, he's had such a tremendous year. He's leading the league in hits and all this. He really done a tremendous job. So he'll be. I'd love to see them all make it, whether they do or not. You know, I'm not sure. You know, Vladdy, as much heat as he's taken, you know, you put his numbers up against most first basemen. You know, he's going to be right in the mix. It's good to see. You know, he's bounced back over the weekend. You know, Chapman, the player of the month, the first month that he's been. It was kind of a battle since then, but he looked like he's starting maybe hopefully regrouping a little bit. Shit, Merrifield. You know, he's just had a good solid year. This is who he is. His days in Kansas City. He's just a steady player. He's not going to light you up with all the home runs, but he's going to do things to help you win. And then, of course, you got, KK out there in center field. There's not a better center fielder, and he just makes things happen. So, you know, the Blue Jays team ought to be proud, and I hope they all make it somehow.
Yeah, and question for you during your days as a skipper when your players were in contention for All-Star games, were you rooting those guys on, or would you rather have them take a few days off and rest up for the games that are after the All-Star break?
Oh shoot, we were rooting them on, you know, because it's a nice reward, you know. The anytime because very few guys get to go to the All Star game. You know, you have your certain guys that are perennial guys, you know, like we talk about Vladdy Jr., you know, and some other guys I think have already also been before, but it's really an honor. So you know, they'll get their rest. They'll find it's kind of a whirlwind, but they'll find a way to get their rest. And sure looks nice. If you have a major league career, you know, you get a couple All-Star appearances, or at least if you're lucky enough to have one.
Yeah.
Pretty cool deal.
Absolutely. Well, that'll wrap up the leadoff, John. And now it's time for Gabbing with Gibby, brought to you by Tim Hortons. Want to tell you about what's going on at Tim's this week. You can cool down with Tim's premium cold coffee drinks, like a handcrafted vanilla ice latte or caramel toffee cold brew with espresso infused foam. Keep it cold with Tim's cold coffee drinks. You can try one today at participating restaurants in Canada. Today on Gabbing with Gibby, brought to you by Tim Hortons, we bring on someone I've been a huge fan of, following the Mets all my life. He was the general manager of the New York Mets from 1997 to 2003, assembling a team that made it to the World Series in 2000. He's currently a baseball analyst for MLB Network, for TSN 1050 Radio, in addition to a host on Sirius XM's MLB Network Radio's The Leadoff Spot. It's our pleasure to bring on Gabbing with Gibby, Mr. Steve Phillips. Steve, pleasure to meet you.
Yeah, good to be with you guys. And I obviously, with all of those things that I'm doing, overexposure is not a concern of mine. So I'm just willing to go. I'll talk to anybody about baseball. So, but glad to be on with you guys. And Gibby and I go back a long way. So good to see him again.
Yeah, I'd like to. You guys do go back. You were in the Mets system as a player. You both were in the minor leagues together. I believe you were in the instructional league together. And then when you became GM for the Mets, you and Gibby were associated. Why don't you explain to everybody out there how you two guys know each other and your history?
Yeah, so Gibby was drafted in 1980 by the Mets, and I was drafted in 1981. So he's older than me, I think is what that tells us.
They were
right
both bonus babies. Both bonus babies. Though.
Both big bonus babies.
Yeah.
Where'd that bonus go?
You were a first-round pick. I was a fifth-round pick. Now, my claim to fame is that in the 1981 draft, the Mets also drafted Roger Clemens in the 12th round out of San Jacinto Junior College. And he was not yet at Texas. And so the Mets, Clemens wanted 35,000. The Mets had offered him 25,000. And Joe McIlvaine, the scouting director at the time, flew down 3 times to Texas to watch Clemens to see if they're going to give him the extra 10,000. He got rained out all 3 times. I got Clemens' $10,000. And so I ended up signing. And so, yeah, Mets fans have another reason to hate me that they got me instead of Roger Clemens back in the day. But Gibby and I go back a long way. That first year we were in Instruction League together and over in Madeira Beach in St. Pete, Florida, hanging out there. And then our careers I followed his career as a player. I didn't get as far as he did, obviously, to the big leagues. But then we worked together when I was in the front office with the Mets, and he was, on the coaching staff, managing staff throughout our minor league system, and a good buddy, and obviously somebody I've got a lot of baseball respect for, and as a person as well.
Yeah, Steve gave me my first job. Anybody don't know? When I could have hung around as a catcher in AAA somewhere, but Steve and Jerry Hunsick were together over there, and they called and gave me Vern Hoshite, for the longtime Rovey catch instructor. So he gave me my first job, and I don't know if I've ever thanked you for that, Steve. I probably is more of a thorn in your side than that, but I want to make sure I thank you for that. But Steve is one of the best GMs, and I guarantee you that Mets could use him now. New York wasn't a problem for him. A lot of guys go there and they wilt, because of the constant pressure. Steve handled it like a pro, and like you said, he got to the World Series, and that's big up there, man. You know what? That like our co-host here, he lives and dies, man, and that's what them New Yorkers do. And you somehow you navigated it, dude. And I tip my hat to you.
I appreciate it. And by the way, Mets fans are dying right now. So I have questions. Are we going to get through the show okay? Are you going to be all right getting through the show okay right now?
I couldn't sleep. I can't sleep anymore. They're killing me. I can't take it.
Yeah, it's been a tough run. And obviously yesterday's loss, a really tough one as well. But Gibby, I was proud of Gibby. When it's really interesting because when Gibby was managing the minor leagues, the one thing I was worried about is, I knew he could be there to support a guy, but I was worried that he'd be there to chew out a guy if he needed it. And then I watched him manage in the big leagues when he's on the mound with Ted Lilly. And I'm thinking, what was I ever worried about with this guy? And then umpires around the league were just reeling from Gibby going after them. And I thought, why was I ever worried that Gibby would be able to get in somebody's face? Because, man, he got in a lot of faces over the course of time.
Hey, Stevie, I was politicking though, man. I was in your ear. Hey, you need any help up there? Let me bail you out. Poor Valentine, man.
Well, John had a good run as a manager in the minor leagues. I mean, very successful manager down there.
Oh, for sure. And, look, Gibby's got a great demeanor about him, right? And he can be there to support you, but he's also the boss. And he's respected. Honestly, you think about this, I don't know that there's anybody in the game that doesn't respect Gibby. And with that, he was always upfront, honest. The players played hard for him all the time. I mean, that's what you want when you hire a manager. You want the players to respect him, play hard for him. The other thing is, Gibby's got this easygoing demeanor about him that with the media, I was always when I would be in Toronto and I'd watch with the media, they all liked him and therefore, they accepted what he said. They interacted well. And so it was, he's really good at that stuff in ways that just came naturally for him.
Hey, Stevie, it's like they were fascinated by this redneck dude, man. It's like going to the zoo, you see some caged animal and you're everybody's like, wow.
They were always waiting for the next Gibbyism that was coming out, which is pretty cool. So they'd be waiting for the next reason to chuckle, and he always gave it to them.
Oh, God. It's funny. Bobby Cox, the first time I met Bobby Cox, right, through Jerry Howarth, and I was talking to him, he was, wow, it's Bobby. And I said, you got any advice for me, Bobby? Because I was just starting out. He goes, I said, with the media. And he goes, yeah. He says, you know what? Talk a lot and say nothing. I said, that's perfect. But I can do that that's what I do.
Yeah. So it's funny because I told Bobby Cox, when I was with the Mets, running the Mets, and he's managing the Braves, at the end of it, I said to him, when I was in the media, I said, if I ever had to pick you out of a police lineup, I'd have to have you turn around because I only know what you look like from behind because we chased you for 6 years. We never went in front of you. I have no idea what you look like at all. So, yeah.
That's beautiful, man. All right, Johnny, hit him hard. What do you got there, brother?
Yeah, let's go to talk about the Jays first. Obviously, we're at the halfway point. They're still there in the wild card hunt. They were kind of expected to be better at this point. So I want to get your assessment, Steve, of where the Jays are currently, where we stand today, and what do you think they might possibly need to get some more momentum as we go into the second half of the season?
Yeah, so I mean, as it stands here on Monday, they are a playoff team. They'd be the third wild card team, half game up, I think, in the Angels. And they just haven't really had a lot of traction yet this year. It just feels like they make some progress, they give it up. They make some progress, they give it up. They've not had that really good run of success. And I think part of it is Vladdy's not quite had the sort of production that I think they wanted. That being said, like his expected numbers, if you look at analytics, the expected numbers are like 100 points better in slugging percentage than what he's done because of hard hit rate and exit velocity. And so like he's barreling the ball. And even his launch angle is twice this year what it was last year, yet he's not hit as many home runs. Now, he did over the weekend get his first couple home runs at the Rogers Center. He's going to go off right now. I really do believe he's locked in. He's going to start to go off. And look, that Barrios and Kikuchi have turned things around is amazing. The Manoah situation has been the one troubling aspect of the season so far. And so, I mean, that's the one piece of this. And I think if Manoah gets right, I think it solidifies the middle relief a little bit. The bullpens sometimes had to pitch when they didn't really want them to pitch. And so I think that there's a run in them. I don't know if they're catching Tampa. And I don't know they're going to catch Baltimore the way they're playing. But I do think this is a playoff team. And they're going to have to fortify the bullpen, and they're going to get Ryu back at some point, but you don't know what to expect there. I don't think they need offense. I think they're going to fortify the bullpen. Maybe if they need to add some depth just to protect the starting pitching, because they don't have a lot of depth, obviously, after Manoah went down, it might be the way to go, but they just need their good players to play well.
Yeah, I want to follow up with you on Manoah for a second. What do you think, in your assessment, was it a physical thing? Was the fact that he gained a little weight? Was it more of a mental thing? Would you have handled that situation differently when it was apparent that he might and he had problems right from the start this year?
Yeah, so I would have sent him down earlier than they did. They got there, but I think this is multi-pronged, right? This is physical, where whatever he did conditioning-wise, he got thicker in his shoulders and his upper body. And his arm speed wasn't nearly the same. And so that was part of it. So I think there's some physical aspect of it. Mechanically, he rushes down the mound. And when but we don't know is what is he thinking? Is he thinking, I need to throw harder, I'm getting hit, but for whatever reason, his body's rushing down the mound. His arm's dragging behind. He's spinning his slider because he's not on top of it. His fastball's flat. And so mechanically, he's got some things to work on. And then they've got to get to the emotional part of what's going on, because he was hangdog there at the end. It didn't look right. And then mentally, what is he thinking? So they really have a lot of work to do. A little bit of work in 4 areas, I think, to be able to get him back on track. And it's not that easy, right? Because what a pitcher's thinking sometimes messes up what they physically do, Gibby, right? Mechanically what they do. And you can fix the mechanics, but if you don't fix the thinking, then the mechanics, they're going to go right back to that bad habit. And so they've got to fix a lot of that. It was the right move sending him down to Dunedin, get him out of the spotlight. But it's going to take a little time to get it right. And then you hope and pray that he gets immediate success that reinforces all of the things that they've worked on.
Yeah, it's you know what, with him, it's different for him. Because he third in the Cy Young last year. If he had just been average Joe, he could have done it. But it was, this guy's had so much success and so quickly. You're going now. It gets a little bit. I mean, it's a tougher decision, obviously. Steve. You know what? Do you think remember they were talking about I think in 21 he threw 100 innings maybe max, and then he bumped up to 200, because I know the focus in the minor leagues has changed a lot to, you can bump them X number of innings is probably the smart thing to do. So that might have had some effect. And then maybe, I've heard through the grapevine, that with the pitch clock, right? I mean, he's a big guy. He likes to take his time, things like that. Maybe that could affect him a little bit, where everybody's scratching their heads.
Yeah. Well, I think the pitch timer, I mean, if you think about it this way, if we were going to say, okay, Gibby, do push-ups. Now, again, hypothetically speaking here. Okay,
Good luck.
So if Gibby's going to get down to do push-ups, we say, okay, give us 30 push-ups, do it at whatever pace you want. And then we say, okay, give me 30 push-ups, but you need to get it done in 40 seconds, and how quickly you got to go and how physically different that would feel. That's the thing I think all pitchers are feeling right now. And it makes you wonder when you get to August and September, the fatigue factor. So I do think maybe there's some part of the pitch timer that's involved there. But I mean, that at some point, everybody's going through that and other guys are thriving. That being said, when you look at the 6 finalists for the Cy Young Award last year, so Verlander started the season on the injured list, and he's not been his best with the Mets. Then you look at the other pitchers in the National League. Max Fried is on the injured list. Julio Urias is on the injured list. That covers the National League or the American League. Obviously, Verlander now in the National League. But Alcantara is not the same guy that he was last year. Manoah's not the same guy. And Dylan Cease. All 6 of them are lesser this year than they were last year. And so maybe the wear and tear, maybe the pitch timer, maybe it's just coincidence and it's a different story for everybody. But that is the one thing this year that's been odd is the number of starting pitchers, Scherzer and others who have taken big steps backwards from last year to this year.
Yeah. Now, do you think they'll adjust it? Did I hear something about the rules committee or something's going to get together sometime soon and talk about? Do you think they'll add something for the playoffs as far as time?
No,
the pitch clock.
I don't think so at all. I don't. I think that they're going to keep it the way that it is. I think that they're committed to it. And their view is, why would we change the rules in September and October, based upon what happens in the season? And to a degree, I understand their logic. It's like in the NFL, where you're going to delay a game penalty. It happens a lot in the NFL, right? And when it happens, we blame the team and the quarterback for not getting the playoff in time. But in baseball, we want to blame the rule, right? And so it is one that, and by then everybody should have adjusted to it. And so hitters too, right? Hitters are getting in trouble with this. In fact, the Baltimore Orioles are the one team, they've had one batter that has had a pitch timer violation. They're by far the least of anybody because they practiced it and they're young guys who a lot of them did it in the minor leagues where they're used to doing it, right?
Hey, well, what about the Little League rule in extra innings where the guy starts on second base and where they don't use that in the playoffs? I mean,
that's true. True.
If anything, put him at first base where he's not in scoring position,
Yeah, that's true.
But you know what? Why would you change anything if all these teams are playing for is a piece of metal?
Yeah.
Why would we worry about any of this anyway? $1 billion piece of metal.
So the commissioner did a Time magazine interview just last week where he regretted the Astros sign stealing that he offered immunity to the players. And he regretted his sort of off the cuff glib comment about the piece of metal. Right. So, I mean, sometimes the passion of the commissioner gets him. And then he looks back at it. He's like, I probably should have said that. And I think he probably caught himself in that moment a little bit, even going after the Oakland A's fans probably, a couple weeks ago as well.
Hey, he needs to hire Jay Horowitz as his PR director.
So. I saw Jay the other day. I was at Citi Field for the Hall of Fame induction ceremony. Al Leiter got inducted, and he asked me to be on the field with him. And Jay got a special award there as well that day. So Jay's getting all kinds of honors right now for sure.
Good. Oh, that's awesome, man. That is awesome. All right, so the Blue Jay. All right, hey, you know what's funny, Steve? You were talking about where they're at now, what they need, and things like this. And this is the beauty of the wild card, right? We look at it and say, everybody think, well, they've been struggling. Yeah, but they actually hold a playoff spot right now, And there's been a lot of teams, even in the last few years. You look at the Atlanta Braves, who won it all a couple of years ago, right? Weren't they 500 until August or something?
Right, and turned it on, right? You're right. Came back on the match, yeah.
So this is where, and you would know this better than anybody, because I've talked to a lot of people in the game. The trade deadline's coming up. This is where the GMs. This is a battle between the GMs. Who can identify what that team needs and who can pull it off. Now, as coaches in managers and all that, we think you should be able to have everything, right? There's no limitations, but that's not the case because you can't trade for anybody, you can't pay anybody. So there's a lot of things, that you have to keep under consideration. But this is where I think the GMs earn your stripes, don't you think? When you're that close,
yeah.
and you get.
Yeah, absolutely. This is. I mean, as a general manager, you watch the game and it's agonizing. Like there's no joy in it. It is so painful to watch because you can't hit for them, you can't pitch for them, you can't catch it for them, and it's agonizing to watch because you
just pay them. You just pay them.
Yeah, right, exactly. So then you just wait for something to go wrong, and then if it doesn't go wrong, you wait for the next thing to go wrong. It is agonizing, especially in the playoffs. But it is your chance to compete. Right, as a general manager, all of us have this drive to compete as well, but we have to turn it on and turn it off, turn it on and turn it off based on the timing of the season. And so the trade deadline, especially this year, you look at the wild cards in both the American League and National League, and the number of underperforming teams, particularly in the National League, where you got the Padres and the Mets and the Cardinals. They're in a spot like, what do? They spend a lot of money. They've got players that have won in the past. Do they go for it? Do they not go for it? But this is the time where general managers can decide who wins in the postseason with the right move, because there are guys out there that will put teams over the top. Teams are going to compete for many of the same guys. Like Marcus Stroman, you know him. He's pitching out of his mind right now this year. Tough outing yesterday, had a blister in London, but he's a guy that's going to impact somebody. And again, you look at some teams who don't need an ace; they just need a solid number 2, number 3 guy. Right. Stroman fits that well because he's really a number 2, 3, pitching like an ace. And so, there will be some general managers that will decide the playoffs based upon the acquisitions at the deadline.
Yeah, that's where you're in your stripes. Hey, how nice would it be, Billy Epler? I know he's under the gun and all that up there. When you got an owner that's he don't care what he spends, right?
Oh my!
Make a big difference, huh?
So it is honestly. I have owner envy. All right, I have a little owner envy going on right now. But I say that in the jest because listen, Fred Wilpon, Nelson Doubleday, they gave me resources. Our issues were never about resources. They weren't what they are today. I did the math on this the other day that for Robbie Cano's $40 million, when they released Robbie Cano, he had about $40 million left. And at the time, I thought Steve Cohen was worth $14 billion. I've been corrected now that it's 18. But I did the math that for somebody who has $14 billion, $40 million is the same as $287.86 to somebody who has $100,000. Think about that. It's nothing. I mean, listen, $287 is a lot, but it's the same as $40 million to somebody who has $14 billion.
Next, bring somebody else in next. Oh gosh. It's I know he takes a lot of heat, but it's a beautiful thing. A guy who wants to win, right?
Oh, he's willing to pay for it. And here's the thing. You take a lot of heat from other owners is really the thing. Like other owners are all upset because he's making them look bad because he's willing to spend whatever. And yet he's gotten burned by it right now. So I'm sure that from other ownership groups, there's some joy in that because everybody's petty to a certain degree. But I do think that in the long run, give me the resources over let me try to figure out with less resources. And we've got a better chance to win.
Yeah, no, I hear you.
Hot summer days are almost here. Get ready for refreshing lake dips, lots of cool shade, and the frostiest of frosty sips. All summer long. Keep it cold with Tim's Cold Drinks.
Johnny, what do you got for him on the Metropolitans in your agony?
I mean, you're talking about Cohen. I mean, how long is it going to take for him? He doesn't seem like an impulsive guy, very methodical. But the embarrassment that's happened this season when you have a payroll before the penalty of $353 million, which is really worse than the worst team money can buy that happened in the early 90s. What do you think he's going to do? Do you think he's going to kind of clean house at the end of the year? Are these guys in jeopardy? Is Epler in jeopardy, even Buck, or is he going to stay committed to those?
I'd be surprised if, like Buck, they won 101 games last year. I mean, here's the thing. The team that's on the field now is much the same team that won 101 games last year.
It is.
And so this is what happens in baseball, is that there are things that happen from one year to the next. You're like, how is this possible? The Cardinals are asking the same thing, right? They were like a 94-win team last year, and they were great defensively, the best defensive team. And now they're not a good defensive team, but it's much of the same guys. It's just baseball does this to you, that just when you think you know what you're talking about, just when you think you know what you're doing, just when you think you've seen everything, baseball happens. And so I mean, and I got to tell you, I don't think that Steve Cohen is overly emotionally impulsive when it comes to this stuff. So I don't know that he's going to overreact. I mean, Buck Showalter's not a worse manager this year than he was last year. They're just the good players aren't playing well. So, and I don't know that Billy Epler's in trouble. Everybody celebrated the moves they made. Everybody, even baseball geniuses, that are out there. And you go to any ESPN and Baseball Tonight, everything MLB Network, everybody was like, look at what they did. They won a roster, and now it's falling apart. So I don't know that he's going to let anybody go. They might bring in a president of baseball operations. So a David Stearns in Milwaukee, who's out at the end of this year in his deal there, maybe he'll come in and be part of that. But I do think they'll do something, but I don't think they're going to clean house.
Hey, unless he wants to be another George Steinbrenner.
Yeah, I don't know. I think there's a lot of similarities because he'll get what he wants, right? The other day, Hal Steinbrenner was frustrated about Yankee fans being disappointed in the team with all the injuries and everything else they had. I'm like, wait a minute. Like George would have said, you're right, Yankee fans. We expect more from our team.
Exactly.
So it's like the script has been flipped in New York in a pretty significant way. But I don't know that Steve Cohen is going to be as knee-jerk in a reaction as certainly George Steinbrenner was.
Well, it's exciting for the game, man. You can sit back and, that's where, you know what? And then when you're on them shows, it makes the shows that much more interesting, right?
Oh, man, listen. I mean, look, we all want either unbelievably great performance or the train wreck. Give us one of those. And from a media perspective, it works for us to be able to talk about it because it becomes interesting to see what happens when people are at their best or at their worst. It's when everybody's sort of in between that it's like, where do we go to find things? Although we've got plenty this year with the Reds and the Rays and all these teams now that are playing some exciting baseball.
Well, tell me something, Steve, because you know what? It's one thing to be a GM, right, in the big leagues. It's another thing to be one in New York City or like Boston, right? It's everything's magnified. You could sneak by. If the Mets are having this kind of season in the Midwest somewhere, everybody kind of dismisses it, and they go about their business. What's it like in New York? I mean, you talk about, you couldn't have slept, man. I mean, did you get much sleep back?
Yeah. So it's interesting that I'll never forget. We opened the season one day in Miami in Florida against the Marlins, and we lost the game. And the New York Post headline the next day was our payroll was like $90 million at the time, and it said $90 million bust. And I'm like, it's one game. So I said to the writer, Tom Keegan, who's a buddy and a character, I said. He goes, yeah, I don't write the headlines. I'm like, I know, but seriously, we lost one game. He goes, no, I know. And so we won the next game. And I said to him, right, what's the headline for tomorrow then? He goes, well, $90 million for a 500 team. I'm like, I'm like, man, you can't win for anything in New York. But I mean, it is different than any place you'd want to go. Billy Beane, friend of the show, I heard, would always sort of reach out to me and say, I would never want that job. I'd never want that job in New York. He said, because one, you get money, payroll money, and you spend it because you think you have to. And if you don't, you're going to be judged by the media. And it causes you sometimes to make a decision that you might not want to make, but you got to go do it. So you lose a pitcher, you lose Mike Hampton to free agency. So you need to get another pitcher. The next best guy in the market is Kevin Appier. And you got to pay him a little bit more to get him, and you do it, and you start chasing your tail a little bit with it just because it's what you have to do when you have money. The other thing for me was the death threats and stalkers that I had. I had a psychiatrist call up and say that her patient was a threat to my life. Some guy in New Jersey would tear up his mom and dad's house every time one of my relievers gave up the game and everything else, and that he made threats to the therapist about me. So she calls. We tell Major League Baseball security. They follow the guy for a couple of weeks, and they come in and tell me, they sit down, all serious guys in suits, and they come in, and I'm like, all right, this is going to be good. or not. And so they come in and say, well, here's the thing. He's not very healthy. He's not mentally stable. However, we think that if he comes here, he might just hurt himself, but not hurt you. But just in case, when you go on the road in Philadelphia and Montreal, because it was within reach of where he was in New Jersey, we're going to provide you with security. And I had to have an escort from the bus into the hotel. They had to check my room before I went into the room. I couldn't leave the room at the hotel. They'd bring me from the hotel to the bus. Yeah, I couldn't go on the field during batting practice. And then they would station a guard outside the suite where I was watching the game. And then I had to have an alias on the road everywhere I went, which, by the way, was Sam Adams. I thought it was a genius alias on the road. But here's, like, I would call a general manager, for trades back then. And I'd say, hey, and I'd get his assistant. And she said, well, he's on the line. Can I have him call you back? Yeah, you can. But you have to ask for Sam Adams at the hotel. They're like, what? So I had another guy who showed up at the stadium, made threats. They grabbed him, got a restraint. I mean, it was, yeah, I don't know. They're not doing this to anybody in Kansas City. I don't think, but yeah, so being the GM of New York could be a little crazy.
Hey, Johnny, wait a minute. I didn't know you saw a therapist. It's on therapist. You see it.
It was a distant relative.
Years ago.
It was a distant relative of mine up there.
Hey, I got a quick one for you. I think it was 80. Was it 86? 80, yeah, 86. I was up in with the Metros, and I was down in the bullpen. That was my job, warming up guys in the bullpen. I've done that my whole life, man. Even like my coaching career, I'm good at it. But anyway, so we're sitting there in there. Vern Hoshai was the bullpen coach, but there was like 2 rows of seats, and we had that TV out there in the right field corner at Shea, right, the bullpen,
right.
So I'm sitting in the front row, and we got the TV, so we're watching the game, and you can see out through the plexiglass. And there's some guys sitting behind it, Randy Myers and a couple other guys. And we always had the security guy there, who was a retired New York City cop, right? So we're sitting there one day, and all of a sudden, kind of in the corner of my eye, I see this guy walking down. You know that you could get all the way around Shea underneath, right?
Right.
And he comes, he kind of walks up, and I kind of glanced at anything in the oven. Then I hear some commotion. Then I hear Randy Myers, whatever. Next thing you know, you hear a wham, right? Randy Myers body slammed this guy, right? And now our security guy down there, he's got these steel-toe boots. He's kicking on this guy. This is the bullpen. We got a game going on.
Randy Myers, I roomed with Randy Myers in the minor leagues.
That's right. You would have been.
And I did. I roomed with Randy in the minor leagues. He played in Columbia the year I was there. And wow. So it was not an act. None of that was an act at all. Yeah, we called him Wojo, because he looked like from the Barney Miller show. He looked like Wojo there because he used to get his hair cut straight across. He was a different character, though. Man, the number of characters and different personalities that if people really knew, like you got to know a player on the mound, but if you really got to know some of these guys, there was some real characters that came up during the course of time in baseball for sure. I'm sure every sport does, but baseball, man, there are some crazy folks that played this game.
Oh yeah, well, you got to be a little nuts, man. Either that, if you come in normal, you end up nuts.
Exactly.
Things we're talking about. But anyway, and that guy that came back to the end of the cops came down and arrested him. He had like a big old Bowie knife in his bag, and he had lithium in his bag. I guess they just released him from some mental hospital, and it's like great.
Well, that's what happened. That's what happened with my guy who showed up at the stadium. He said he wanted me because I was giving money out to all the players, and so he wanted me to give him some money. And he came back a few times. Then they grabbed him one time, and he took off. And he left a bag behind that had a Bible in it, and the security guys get worried that they may be hearing voices. And so we got a restraining order. The police ended up, the papers got it, called this poor guy's family. I felt horrible for the guy. I mean, he obviously wasn't healthy. And his family said, we don't think he'll hurt anybody. He just isn't really healthy.
Okay. So, well, I'm glad you don't.
Yeah. So they took care of it. But they used to tell me, don't take the same route home every day. And make sure nobody's following you when you're going home. I'm like, is this job worth it? Like, what am I doing here?
Hey, dude, you got to the World Series, man. You darn right it was. It was worth it. It was worth it.
I do, talking about New York, I mean, the good points, the bad points of it, but I wanted to talk to you about September 21st, 2001, the first baseball game in New York after 9/11. Mets versus Brave. Piazza hits that home run in the 8th inning that literally helped lift New York City and even the country up a little bit after the attack. As a general manager of a New York franchise during that dark time, take us back, if you wouldn't mind, to kind of share some of the memories of that time period in New York, and you as a GM for the Mets.
Yeah. So on 9/11 itself, I was driving into Shea Stadium. We were scheduled to have organizational meetings. We were going to do them over the phone and conference calls. And I was driving in, and I had the news on, and somebody called in and said a plane had hit one of the trade centers. Now, at that point, they thought it was like a commuter plane. They used to pull around the banners behind it that would fly around the city and that. And then I got up over the bridge, and it was a clear day, so you could kind of see in there. And then I heard that another plane had hit. So when I got to the offices, everybody was around the TVs. People were crying. It was awful. And so at that point, it was pretty clear that, the team was in Pittsburgh at the time. So I told everybody go home because they're going to shut down bridges. They're going to be hard to get out of town. So get back to your families. And I wanted to get home too. So we all left. I called Jay Horwitz in Pittsburgh and woke him up and got him in watching the TV. And so we didn't know what was going to happen with the season. So we kept everybody there in Pittsburgh. But then we were across the street from a federal building in Pittsburgh at the hotel there. And then when the plane in, I think, Shankville, Pennsylvania went down too, there was a thought that we needed to so we moved them out to a different hotel out of the city. And we waited a day or two and then brought everybody home. The players were anxious to get home because their families were all here back in New York, right? And so it was really an emotional time. And when the players came in and went over the bridge, there was the story was that they were all looking down toward, ground zero, and you could see some of the smoke coming up and that. It just was silent on the bus as they went back there. And so we got everybody back to the stadium. We were there in the front office. Ownership was there. We met everybody, comforted them, told them what we're going to do. And in the meantime, Shea Stadium became a distribution point for supplies to get taken into ground zero. Also, firefighters who had come in from around the country were staying at Shea Stadium. We had set up cots down in the concourses where they could go in, work their shift, come back, rest. We were providing food for them in the concession stands. And then in the ensuing days, when we would take batting practice, the police firemen would come out onto the field. They'd take batting practice with us. I mean, we really sort of engaged the community, but it was such a scary and emotional time. And then when the thought was we're going to come back and play, I sat in meetings with the FBI, Office of Emergency Management, the police department, the fire department, and Port Authority. And I'm sitting in meetings and listening to everything it's going to be to get us through that. I'm thinking, what are we doing? Like, should we be coming back right now or not? And the day of the game, I was having to have a meeting with our players about an evacuation plan that if something were to happen during the game, we don't want you going to the stands. We're going to get the families out. We're going to meet. And I'm thinking, what has happened? Like, the world changed like that for everybody. And so it was such an emotional time and a scary time. And one that, with the fact that Shea Stadium was right next to LaGuardia Airport, my thought was, you want to change American lifestyle, hit a sporting event. Think what that does to all of us, right? And for our leisure time and our enjoyment and the fear that could come with that. But, we had to get back at some point. And so I sat through the meetings that day. They brought bomb sniffing dogs through. It's when they started setting up all of the metal detectors. And it was quite an undertaking. And at some point I was so overwhelmed that I went up to the suite where I would watch the game, and I just needed to get away. And I'm sitting up there and I look down on the field, and Diana Ross is down on the field with a gospel group of high school kids. And they're rehearsing God Bless America. And she's singing, and the kids are singing, and she's going around to each one, looking in their eyes and touching their faces. Like, I started bawling. I was bawling because all of the emotions of everything that had been going on with that was hitting me. And so I'm thinking, all right, so we're going to play the game. So they had the metal detector set up. And so, the national anthem it gave you goosebumps. The chanting of USA gave you goosebumps. The players wearing the hats honoring and representing the the first responders in New York City was so appropriate. We're playing the Atlanta Braves, who, were our nemesis forever. And yet, the Braves, everybody liked New York at that point. It was such a change. Everywhere we went, we got booed, and but everybody was cheering for us. And even the Braves were like so supportive, and Bobby Cox and Bobby Valentine hugging each other. I never in my wildest dreams would have thought I'd see that. Right. And so the game goes on. And at one point I go downstairs, and just before the 7th inning stretch, I'm down in the concourse, and Liza Minnelli is going to come in and sing New York, New York. Now, Liza Minnelli got wheeled in a wheelchair. She had degenerative hip issue going on. She was all made up. She had sequin top on her. She gets wheeled in a wheelchair, and barely gets up out of her chair. And the next thing I know, she puts on her face. She lifts up her head, and she goes strutting out there onto the field. I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I just saw her get wheeled in right there. And she goes out and sings, and then she's doing the leg kick with the firemen and the policemen, like the rock. And I'm thinking that is one of the gutsiest performances I've ever seen, and nobody else would have known about it. So she gets off, she's smiling, walks back, slumps over, gets back down in the wheelchair afterwards, and could barely get through it. But what she gave everybody in that moment was, again, everybody wanted to give something back to try to help everyone heal. And then obviously, the Piazza home run in the 8th inning, the pitch to Alfonso, the two-strike pitch, which was borderline, that got called the ball, that he works the walk. He gets on, and Carsey on the mound, Steve Carsey, a New York kid on the mound, I think from Christ the King in Brooklyn. And then Piazza hits the home run. And I remember leaping up, and all of us were in the booth, my assistants and I, were all crying, because this is what, if there was a storybook ending, if the baseball gods that we talk about a lot in somewhat in jest, but if they were going to touch this game, that was the outcome that it should have been, was Piazza hitting that home run. And the Braves seemed okay with it. It was such a day of healing and celebration and victory, really, for what New York needed in that moment. I mean, honestly, it could not have been scripted any better than being part of that, and being a part of the Mets organization was such an honor, to be able to know everything that went on behind the scenes, and how the people in the Mets organization, and then what New York City did to rally around everything taking place at that time. It was really, I'll never forget the emotions of all of that.
Wow.
I appreciate
Incredible.
you sharing that. I mean, that was an amazing time, and you can't watch any of the replays from that game, from Liza singing to Diana Ross to everything that went through, the emotion and the Piazza home run. You can't watch that today without getting cold chills.
Yeah. It was amazing. It's such an honor and experience to be part of the healing for all of that. And I got to tell you that, Piazza hit a lot of big home runs. But I think by far that was the biggest and most meaningful home run. And it didn't get us to the playoffs. It didn't win a playoff game. It didn't win a World Series. It wasn't a Subway Series matchup with anybody. It didn't it didn't get us anywhere other than victory for New York at the time. And it was the right time of the right moment for that.
Wow. David, that is unbelievable. Well, listen, hey, we want to thank you, man, coming on here and sharing that. We got to quit on that, man. I got chills right now, brother.
Yeah, it's good to be on with you guys, man. Really, Gibby, good to see you. Good, so much fun to visit, and look forward to hopefully doing this again sometime. Yeah, we'll have you back as the season goes along to get your expert opinion on that. Like I said, I love watching you on MLB Network because you're that balance. The game's so crazy with the analytics now that and a lot of people like that. A lot of people, I mean, there's both sides of that, but you got that balance, which I think is the important part. The good teams have that balance, right? They're smart enough. The good coaches and all that, and you have that, and you kind of a good equalizer over there. So, and anyway, but hey, you're working hard, brother, man. Enjoy your vacation, well deserved. All right, thank you. Good to see you guys, John. Thanks so much, and hopefully we talk to you guys again soon.
We got you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Stevie.
What a great guy, Steve Phillips. A great segment, John, gabbing with Gibby, and that 9/11 story really touched me hearing that. Yeah, you know what, Johnny, it's been a while since it happened, but you hear he was right in the thick of it, right? Yeah. From going to work that day, and
us on the outside, as much as it affected us, it's still he was right in the center of it. And it was such a unifying moment, when Piazza hit that home run that game because New York there, they were the center of it. Like you were saying, they ran a lot of operations right out of there, right?
They did.
But and you hear from a guy that's been there. Those are the kind of things that when they happen, is as bad as it was. You should never forget them. It's good to hear about them again, just to keep it fresh in everybody's mind.
Never
How
forget.
crazy things are. Exactly so. But really a touching story.
It was, and I couldn't even imagine being the GM of a franchise in New York during that time, and what you had to put through with the security, and then of course everyone was on edge, and then that one magical night that people came together, the home run, it was like it lifted America, not just New York, to see that.
Yeah. Hey, Stevie was a great GM. He really was.
Yeah, he was.
Very good baseball guy. Very hardworking. Very organized and a fair guy. He gave me my first job, as he talked about, and there's not many guys that could probably handle that, but he could.
Yeah, I hope to bring him back sometime later this season as well. But now, inspired by our friends at Miller Lite, let's get Gibby's roast and toast for the week. And John, I know you have a roast that you definitely wanted to talk about. And you, as a catcher, you saw some things that happened in Major League Baseball this past week that probably had your eyes open a little bit and say, what the heck is going on? Do you want to describe it, or do you want me to kind of give you a little setup for it?
Well, hopefully everybody saw it. They were going scratching
How
their
could
head.
you
We're
not?
talking. Oh yeah, we're talking about that play, the Texas Rangers.
Jonah Heim, he was given a violation for not giving the White Sox runner Elvis Andres a lane at home plate. I mean, it didn't look like there was anything wrong with that. And then he gets called for a violation, and the run scores, ties the game, and Bruce Bochy went out of his mind.
Well, Johnny, it's almost embarrassing for the sport. I got to tell you the truth. I'd have been too embarrassed, to even appeal it. Probably being an ex catcher. But my kid used to play for me. Pedro Grifol is the manager over the White Sox, and then I see the White Sox celebrate. I'm going, oh gosh, But here's the problem with it all. In all seriousness, I never understood the rule when it began. They put it in. It's kind of ironic though. They put it in for Bochy's catcher. Buster Posey, right? The Buster Posey rule when he's with the Giants. But guys don't get hurt all the time, right? But for whatever reason, the problem is, okay, say the Houston gets hot again, they come and they catch the Rangers or something, or maybe there's a tight separation of the wild card teams, and say the Rangers lose out by a game or something. Let's say whether it's winning the division or you're being a wild card team or just completely out of it. That's, probably not going to happen, but you never know. And you look back at one game and you're thinking, okay, the guy's clearly out. The game, but then it's such a vague rule, and you send it up to New York and it becomes an interpretation. Well, did he give him room to slide? Come on, really? I mean, we're that bad? It's like I don't.
Bochy said it best, after the game, one of the worst calls I've ever seen. How can you block the plate from behind the plate?
Yeah, but I would like to know, how come why don't they tell us the umpires, the crew that was up there in New York made that decision? Because I'm surely one guy didn't sign off. There had to be a couple of them going, yeah, we agree, what have you. Unless there's some umpires up there, yeah.
Maybe
they don't like Bochy.
Anonymous. They're anonymous up there in New York who make these calls that sometimes are just outrageous, and you have to say that this call was certainly qualifying as outrageous. But we got to talk about something good, a toast of the week, and got to give it this week to the Cincinnati Reds rookie shortstop, Elly De La Cruz. De La Cruz made his debut less than 2 weeks ago and has sparked the Reds to an amazing run. The rookie already has 3 home runs, 10 RBIs, 8 stolen bases, has an OPS of .989, and he hit for the cycle already, which was the first cycle from a Reds player since 1989. He became the youngest player in 51 years to hit for the cycle at just 21 years of age, the last being Cesar Cedeno in 1972.
Ooh.
Yeah, the Reds won 9 of 11 since De La Cruz was brought up. They now lead the NL Central, all this with a team payroll that ranks 26th in the big leagues at only $83 million. So, toast of the week, got to go to De La Cruz and the Reds.
Yeah, Johnny. You know what? Yeah, you just look at a kid and you think, dang, this guy can do it all. He kind of reminds me. I saw some things I thought that looked like a young Darryl Strawberry a little
I was
bit.
just about to say that. He reminded me of a young Darryl Strawberry.
Long and lean, and
Yep.
could really do about anything. But there's no doubt, the Reds. What a great story, right? Early on, everybody's they're just kind of there. Even there's even talk about managers on the hot seat. David Bell and all that. And now here's a kid comes along that sparks you. I mean, they were playing good, and then they brought him up, and then of course now they got Joey Votto back, and he's up to a great. They're legit, but this is how the game works. We talk about with the Blue Jays on the roller coaster, whatever. It was a little over a month ago. We were talking about the Pittsburgh Pirates were like the talk of the town, doing everything right, blah blah blah. Now they're a couple games out of the cellar.
Yeah, they fell off a cliff.
That's how. That's you never know what's going to happen in this game, and that's kind of the beauty of it, and that's what's so good about these wild card spots because nobody's really out of it, till the end a lot of times. So yeah, but good for him. Good for the Cincinnati Reds franchise. They were one of my favorite teams all time because Johnny Bench was their catcher in the Big Red Machine, and they deserve that, man. It's too good of a baseball city and a historic franchise to not be good.
Yeah, we're very happy for the Cincinnati franchise and the city of Cincinnati. Great town, and I've been to several games there at that ballpark, and it's a great atmosphere. But toasting the Cincinnati Reds, inspired by our friends at Miller Lite.
Corner booths, sticky floors, weekdays that feel like weekends. You never forget the way some things taste. Miller Lite, great taste, 90 calories. Tastes like Miller time.
Well, that about wrap up this edition of the Gibby Show. Don't forget to order a copy of Gibby's book, Gibby Tales of a Baseball Lifer, written by Gibby and Greg Oliver. And don't forget to check Gibby out on all of his social media platforms and subscribe to our YouTube channel for the Gibby Show. That is on YouTube. And you can see all the episodes there and clips and highlights. So I invite you to go to the YouTube channel because it really is great to be able to look back at all the shows. For John Gibbons, this is John Arezzi. We'll talk more baseball with you next week right here on the Gibby Show. Have a great Canada Day. Everyone up in Canada, have a great week, everyone, all the baseball fans, and go Blue Jays.
The Big Red.